Welcome to the Cheating Confession Reddit channel. Today, I'm going to share with you a real-life cheating story. It will give you a better understanding of the issue of infidelity today and help you be more cautious when it comes to a cheating wife. Let's dive into this story together.
Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. Just as I was about to leave for a business trip and head toward my private jet, an unexpected phone call changed my plans. The trip had been canceled, and my presence was no longer needed. With that news, I instructed the crew to return the plane to the hangar and decided to make the most of the day ahead. By the time I arrived home, it would be close to 5:30 p.m., right when my wife usually returned from work. I thought it would be a delightful surprise to take her out for dinner. Little did I know, the surprise awaiting me was far from delightful. Unbeknownst to me, my wife had already made plans of her own once she learned I'd be out of town. She had even left work early to carry them out. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car parked alongside an unfamiliar vehicle. A sense of unease crept in as I stepped inside the house, only to find a trail of carelessly discarded items. Shoes were strewn near the back door, a blouse hung over the staircase, and more clothing led toward the guest bedroom. The slightly ajar door confirmed my worst fears. Pushing the door open, I was confronted by the scene I had dreaded. A man stood near the bed, while my wife, the person I trusted most, knelt before him. The sight, accompanied by the unmistakable sounds of their actions, hit me like a sledgehammer. For anyone thinking this could be salacious or arousing, let me dispel that illusion. It was nothing short of a devastating betrayal. Despite the rage surging within me, I forced myself to remain composed. As I stood there, the man spoke, instructing her to lie down on the bed. Clearing my throat, I broke their sordid moment. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice sharp and cold. "And who is this?" The man's face paled and he stammered, "I thought you were out of town." My wife, realizing the gravity of the situation, froze in shock. Fighting to maintain control, I directed them firmly. "Both of you downstairs, now." Spotting the man's phone carelessly left on the nightstand, I picked it up and scrolled through his contacts until I found a number labeled home. I dialed it, and a woman answered, her voice slightly out of breath. "Hello? Brandon, are you running late again?" "Brandon won't be making excuses tonight," I replied, my tone icy. "This isn't him calling. I'm calling to inform you that your husband is currently at my house, caught in the act with my wife." After a brief pause, I added, "He's unharmed for now." The woman's voice faltered. "What are you saying? Are you sure?" "You're welcome to come and see for yourself," I said, providing her with my address. "Drive safely. No need for you to suffer further because of his actions." Back in the living room, I positioned the guilty pair by the window. "Stay right there," I instructed. While Brandon offered a weak protest, my wife, dragging him by the arm, complied without resistance. "Let go, Viviana, damn it!" he shouted. "She won't let go until I say so," I interjected with a grim smile. "There's a lot about me you don't know. Even Viviana has no idea what I'm capable of." Their puzzled expressions prompted me to elaborate. For most of my life, I was just an ordinary guy. But when I turned 18, I discovered something extraordinary. If I hold someone's gaze for a few seconds, I can implant thoughts in their mind. Anything from subtle suggestions to powerful, almost hypnotic commands. I explained how I had used this ability over the years, sometimes for harmless mischief, sometimes for darker purposes. Eventually, my gift caught the attention of Homeland Security, leading to a lucrative arrangement, a private jet, a generous salary, and government assignments in exchange for using my power responsibly. But I admitted I'd occasionally used it for personal indulgences, including winning Viviana's affections. Now I intended to document her betrayal. Directing them to pose as they had been earlier, I snapped several incriminating photos. Moments later, I heard a car pull into the driveway. When I opened the door, Brandon's wife stood there. "You must be Brandon's wife," I said evenly. "I'm Samuel Derringer. That's your husband by the window alongside my wife." Her face twisted with fury as she marched inside. Without hesitation, she slapped Brandon hard across the face before turning to Viviana. "What kind of person are you?" she spat. I stepped in. "I'll take full responsibility for Viviana's actions," I said, before demonstrating my power. With a simple command, I showcased Viviana's obedience, leaving both Brandon and his wife stunned. The tension in the room was palpable as I turned my gaze to Brandon. Locking eyes, I compelled him to confess everything. Piece by piece, the truth unraveled. Their affair had roots stretching back to high school, and their betrayal had been ongoing for years. By the time Brandon's confession ended, there was no doubt about the depth of their deceit, or the consequences that awaited them both. That morning I arrived at her house to pick her up for school, but her father met me at the door with shocking news. She was gone, and she wasn't coming back. He ordered me to leave immediately, and made it clear that I was never to ask about her again. The weight of his words crushed me. I was left grappling with the belief that her sudden departure was my fault, though I had no idea what I might have done to drive her away. Desperate for clarity, I returned to their house multiple times, begging for an explanation. Each visit ended with her parents refusing to say anything, their silence like a wall I couldn't break through. They warned me to stay away, threatening legal action if I persisted. Eventually, they followed through, calling the police. I was taken to the station and given a stern lecture before my parents arrived to take me home. The officer made it clear that if I returned to their home, I'd be arrested. Devastated and alone, I somehow finished high school before deciding to enlist in the Army, hoping that the structure and distance would help numb the pain. During my 4 years in service, I met Peggy. We fell in love and got married, and I convinced myself that Viviana was a chapter of my life I'd never reopen. After leaving the military, Peggy and I returned to this town about 6 months ago. Then, just a few months later, fate intervened. I saw Viviana at the grocery store. What started as a simple coffee meetup to catch up spiraled into something else. Flirting turned into temptation, and 2 weeks ago, while you were away, we crossed a line we shouldn't have. It happened again a week later, and today marks the 3rd time. Neither of us intended to hurt anyone, and we're deeply sorry for what happened. I finished speaking, then turned to Viviana. "Your turn. Let's hear your side." Viviana nodded. "The first part matches exactly what Brandon described," she began. "We met during our senior year of high school and had an amazing relationship. Everything changed when I missed my period and decided to take a pregnancy test. Sitting on my bed, clutching the result and sobbing, I was startled when my mom walked in and pieced together what was happening. She comforted me at first, but when my dad found out later that evening, his reaction was explosive." Viviana's voice wavered. "He was livid. After he calmed down a little, he declared that I had to terminate the pregnancy and that Brandon could never know. I stood my ground, insisting it was my decision, not his. The argument escalated until we reached a compromise. I could carry the baby to term and give it up for adoption, but I had to leave immediately. That same night, I was sent to my Aunt Janice's house in South Dakota, hours away, with strict orders to cut off all contact, including with Brandon." She took a deep breath before continuing. "My dad's ultimatum was clear. If anyone found out, especially Brandon, he'd disown me. I couldn't even say goodbye. At my aunt's, I finished high school in complete isolation. When I started showing, I had to stop attending classes altogether. My world became unbearably small, just my aunt, my growing belly, and the endless thoughts in my head. By the 6th month, I was drowning in depression. After giving birth, I returned home, only to find out that Brandon had joined the Army and his family had moved away. The guilt and sadness overwhelmed me for months. To distract me, my dad pushed me to take a job at Dr. Jensen's office. I tried to move forward and started dating again, eventually meeting Samuel. He helped me rebuild my life. I thought I had buried the past, until I saw Brandon in the grocery store. Peggy, her tone dripping with sarcasm, broke in. "Oh, how romantic. So what was the plan? Were you two going to run off together?" "No," Viviana responded quickly. "I love Samuel. I never intended to leave him." Brandon looked stunned but didn't speak. Samuel leaned forward, his voice hard. Then what was your goal? Did you think you could keep sneaking around? Viviana shook her head. I wasn't planning anything. I didn't want to leave Samuel unless Brandon left Peggy first. I didn't think it through. I didn't fully consider how much pain this would cause everyone else. Peggy turned to Brandon, her expression cold. Well, this certainly explains a lot. Brandon married me after I got pregnant with our son, Joey. Now I have to wonder, was that the only reason he stayed? Clearly he's still hung up on you. Brandon hesitated before speaking. I'm conflicted. I never stopped loving Viviana, but I love you too, Peggy. I never wanted to leave you or Joey. But seeing Viviana again brought back all the memories of what could have been. I guess I let myself imagine a version of our lives where we picked up where we left off. Now, hearing her say she's committed to Samuel, I feel foolish. Samuel's voice was sharp. They've betrayed us both, Peggy. They broke the vows we trusted in. Viviana spoke up, her voice soft. This isn't about choosing between you two. My love for Samuel is deep. It's built on trust and partnership. What I feel for Brandon is different. It's the intensity of a first love that never got closure. Samuel's anger simmered. Do you remember our vows, Viviana? They weren't conditional. Have you been faithful to me all along? She hesitated. Since we married, yes. But before that, I wasn't entirely honest. When we started dating, I was still seeing someone else. I met him a few times even after we became exclusive, but it ended before we got engaged. Samuel's face darkened. So you lied from the start. How many times? Viviana looked down. A few. It didn't mean anything. It meant something to me, Samuel snapped. You stole time from me to be with someone else. Her voice trembled. I've made mistakes, but they're in the past. I'm sorry. Samuel's gaze was piercing. And what about your bachelorette party? Viviana's face paled. I drank too much that night. There was a dancer, and I crossed a line I'll always regret. Peggy turned to Brandon, her voice cutting. Anything else you'd like to share? Brandon, Samuel began, his voice thick with emotion. I need to know if there are things you've kept from Peggy, things you're not proud of. Have you ever crossed a line with her that you wouldn't have if I were around? Brandon hesitated, then admitted. There was a time I went out with someone else while Peggy and I were dating, but it was before we became exclusive. Since then, I've flirted here and there, but I've never done anything I'd call unforgivable. This whole situation just got out of hand, Peggy chimed in, her voice heavy with regret. We never wanted this to happen. Hurting you two was never our intention. Samuel's frustration boiled over. Regret doesn't erase the damage, he snapped. Brandon, I'll take you at your word that this wasn't intentional. But Viviana's choices tell me there's a deeper issue at play, something that's been brewing for a long time. I've always made it clear that infidelity is a line I can't overlook. He turned back to Viviana, his anger mingled with hurt. Was I not enough for you? We were intimate regularly 3 or 4 times a week. How often did I end up with the leftovers of your time with Brandon? Even if you thought you were hiding it, I could feel it. Did my love mean so little? Or were you just looking for something different? Samuel's voice cracked as he confronted her. Be honest with me. Have you been completely faithful since we got married? Have you broken any promises? I've been faithful since our wedding, Viviana replied quickly, though his piercing gaze demanded more. Then what about before? He pressed. Did you ever cross the line, even before we tied the knot? Not since we decided to be exclusive, she admitted. But at the beginning, before we were committed, I was still seeing someone else. I ended it once we agreed to be serious, but there were a few encounters before that. I've always felt guilty about it, so I didn't tell you. Samuel's expression hardened. So you started this relationship with dishonesty and betrayal. How many times did it happen? Just a few, she whispered. They didn't mean anything to me. They might have been meaningless to you, Samuel retorted, but they mean everything to me. Those were moments you chose someone else over me. They were stolen from us. It only happened when you were away for work, she protested. It's not like we could have spent those nights together anyway. Samuel's voice turned icy. But you still made the choice. You reached out to him, arranged to meet, and followed through. That's not a mistake. That's deliberate. Viviana lowered her head. The last time was months before our wedding. He was leaving town, and it was supposed to be a final goodbye. So you would have kept it going as long as it suited you? Samuel's tone was sharp, slicing through her excuses. Tears streamed down her face. I wish I could undo it all. I love you, Samuel. Hurting you is my biggest regret. Was I not enough? Samuel's voice broke as he asked the question. I've done everything I could to make our life good. Why wasn't that enough? It wasn't about you, she sobbed. It was about unresolved feelings for Brandon. You've been an amazing husband. I never doubted that. Then why treat me like I'm expendable? Samuel's words were bitter. Am I just someone to fall back on when you're bored? No, she cried. I married you because I love you. I still do. Samuel's face hardened. You call this an accident, but you invited him into our home, our sanctuary. That speaks volumes about how little respect you have for me. Viviana's tearful gaze locked on him. Is there any chance for us? Samuel sighed deeply. Maybe with time I can forgive, but I won't forget. Rebuilding trust will take years. Are you prepared for that? And Brandon is out of our lives permanently. That's not negotiable. Viviana hesitated, glancing between Brandon and Samuel. Her uncertainty was plain, and Samuel shook his head. Your hesitation says it all. You're not choosing me. You're weighing your options. She instinctively moved toward Samuel, but her hand was still on Brandon's arm. Realizing her mistake, she collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Please, Samuel, give me another chance. You've made your choices, Samuel said, his tone resolute. Now you'll have to live with them. Peggy turned to Brandon, her voice cold. So what's your decision? Are you staying with your family, or do you want to pursue Viviana? If you want to stay with me, you'll need to prove you're worth it. Brandon stammered, I don't know, Peggy. Fine, she said, sinking onto the couch, her tears spilling over. Samuel watched the scene with a grim expression. The truth is out now. Some might lash out in rage or seek public vengeance, but that's not my way. The tension in the room lessened slightly as he continued. There will be consequences. Viviana, you know about the prenuptial agreement. Your infidelity means you'll receive only a fraction of our assets. Had you remained loyal, things would have been different. But you couldn't even make it to our second anniversary. He added, as for Brandon, his punishment will last a lifetime. He'll face restrictions that ensure he never repeats this. Peggy's face reflected her shock and confusion. Samuel guided her into the kitchen, speaking quietly. I've made sure Brandon understands the gravity of his actions. I haven't harmed him physically, but his betrayal will haunt him. I hope he learns from this. Peggy managed a faint smile. I didn't expect that, but thank you. Samuel nodded. Take care of yourself and Joey. If you ever need support, call me. You're not alone. As he walked away, Samuel reflected on the wreckage left behind. Each of them would have to pick up the pieces, finding their own path forward from the shattered remains of their lives. They approached the situation with clarity and detachment, offering advice unclouded by personal biases. I promise, Peggy reassured firmly. For now, let Brandon know he's no longer welcome. I'm committed to supporting you and Joey. Who knows? It might even help me heal too. Without delay and free from hesitation, we stepped back into the room, only to be greeted by a loud quarrel. Brandon and Viviana's voices clashed in heated argument. How could you humiliate me like that? I never thought you'd actually go through with it, Brandon exclaimed angrily. I didn't have a choice, I was cornered, Viviana retorted, her voice trembling with frustration. Is that so? I didn't see anyone forcing your hand, Brandon snapped back. I intervened, addressing them both with measured control. You brought this upon yourselves. Now you'll have to deal with the fallout of your choices. Turning sharply to Brandon, I said, your actions have delighted 4 divorce lawyers and swelled their bank accounts. But your behavior shattered your families and left your child to pick up the pieces. For once, I'm relieved we don't have a child together. Brandon pleaded desperately. Samuel, think this over. I can change. I'll try harder. You've managed to turn what should have been a straightforward decision into a complicated mess, I replied coldly. You hesitated because you wanted to keep us both. That might work for some, But it doesn't work for Peggy or me. A real relationship requires love, trust, and respect. Even if you believe you love us both, there's no trust or respect left here. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Viviana collapsed into sobs. Deep inside, I hoped they'd find whatever fleeting happiness they sought together, because as far as Peggy and I were concerned, this chapter was closed. Fixing them with a final hard stare, I said, "Forget anything I ever told you about my career or my skills, but remember this moment and its consequences. Brandon, you should take responsibility for your actions publicly. Don't fight the divorce." Peggy interjected, her tone resolute. "I need to pick Joey up from the sitter and head home. Brandon, I don't care where you spend the night, but you're not coming back to my house. Once you've found a place, we'll arrange for you to collect your belongings. Goodbye, Brandon." With that, she grabbed her purse and left. Brandon shouted after her, rushing to follow, but stopped when he realized he wasn't fully dressed. He hurried upstairs, threw on some clothes, and stormed out the door moments later. I turned to Viviana. "Don't just sit there. Pack your things and leave. You have 10 minutes or your belongings will be on the lawn." Glancing at my watch, I added, "Your time starts now." Viviana shot me a pleading look, but when no sympathy met her gaze, she trudged upstairs to pack. 11 minutes later, she reappeared, her face streaked with tears. "Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice small and broken. "You should have thought about that before having an affair," I said icily. "Your problems are no longer mine. I've already called your father to pick you up. He'll be here soon." Her eyes widened in panic. "What did you tell him? Did you explain why?" "I told him you needed somewhere to stay," I replied curtly. "The rest is up to you. Once you're settled, we can arrange for the rest of your belongings." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Samuel, don't you love me anymore?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I took a deep breath, my chest heavy with emotion. "Yes, I do. And that's why this hurts so much. I gave you everything. But love alone isn't enough. We can't stay together. In time, we'll both heal, but it starts with us parting ways now." "I'll contact a lawyer tomorrow to begin the divorce process," I continued. "If you don't contest it, it will be simpler for both of us. Let's not prolong the pain." Viviana stood silently, her face a mask of despair and reluctant understanding. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find both her father, Jim, and her mother, Mary. Viviana collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Jim's expression was steely as he spoke in a low, menacing tone. "If you've harmed her, you'll regret it." "I've done nothing to hurt her," I replied evenly. "Her bags are here, and she'll tell you the rest when she's ready." Jim's eyes lingered on me, scrutinizing, before he picked up her luggage and guided her to the car. Once they left, I sank into the recliner, the weight of everything crushing me. Tears flowed freely, and I cried myself to sleep. The next morning, sunlight streaming through the window reminded me it was time to move forward. I called my boss to take the day off, contacted a lawyer, closed our joint accounts, and opened new ones. The divorce moved quickly since Viviana didn't contest it. A month later, I reached out to Peggy, who was staying with her parents alongside Joey. She mentioned they had put their house up for sale. Meanwhile, Brandon and Viviana had moved into a small apartment where arguments were frequent and intense. One day, Peggy asked about the hypnotic suggestion I had supposedly used on Brandon and Viviana. "Will it last? Will he always believe it?" I chuckled. "Denial is a powerful thing. He might question it someday, but who can say?" The pain had dulled, leaving a hint of pity for Brandon. "Did you have to go that far?" Peggy asked. I smirked without answering. Over time, I grew close to Joey, becoming like a surrogate uncle. Peggy and I maintained a casual friendship, though I had hoped for more. At Joey's 4th birthday, I noticed a man I didn't know. Peggy introduced him as someone new in her life. Taking the hint, I stepped back, assuring her she could reach out if she needed anything. 7 months later, she remarried. Seeing her move on prompted me to try dating again. I met a kind woman at the mall, and though trust didn't come easily, I was learning to rebuild it. 14 months after the divorce, I ran into Brandon at a grocery store. He revealed that Viviana had cheated on him too, leading to their separation, a bitter irony. "So, Brandon," I asked, "did you learn anything from all this?" He looked at me, confused. "What do you mean? Do you think you'll ever cheat or pursue a married woman again?" I pressed him further. "Even if I had the option, I wouldn't do it," he stated with conviction. "My ex-wife's unending anger looms over my life like a storm cloud, making happiness seem impossible. The woman I betrayed her with ended up betraying me too, leaving me utterly alone. Now my days revolve around frozen dinners and wondering what keeps me going." "Have you found no solace anywhere?" I asked gently. "I regret the role I played in what happened," I admitted. "But you need to persevere. Joey still relies on you, despite everything. Mistakes don't erase responsibility. I know some people who might be able to offer discreet assistance. It's not a guarantee, but I'll see what I can arrange. Do me one favor," I added. "Spend Friday night with a bottle of whiskey and get some sleep. When you wake up, things might feel just a little better." He shot me a skeptical look but nodded. "I'll stay quiet," he agreed. "Good," I replied. "And let me be clear. If I hear about you cheating again or involving yourself with another married woman, we'll have a very different conversation, and you won't like it." "Understood," he said. "Thank you, Samuel. If this helps, I'll owe you more than you know. You have no idea how much I've been through." "Let's try to resolve this before you consider anything drastic," I said. "And remember, this stays between us." As I walked away, I gave him a look suggesting that improvement was possible, though not without some challenges ahead. About 6 weeks later, I ran into Jim and Mary at the mall. I was ready to offer a quick wave and keep moving, but Jim stopped me. "Samuel, could we have a word?" he asked. I gestured for him to go on. Both Jim and Mary expressed regret over the past. Jim acknowledged feeling partially at fault because of how they handled her pregnancy. They apologized and asked if I could forgive them. "Jim, Mary, you didn't force her actions," I said. "Sure, you could have been more supportive, but I understand you were trying to do what you thought was best. Hindsight always brings clarity. There's no need for apologies. I hold no grudges." "Thank you, Samuel," Jim said, visibly relieved. "We've also arranged for her to see a therapist. It started as a way to help her deal with the aftermath of the affair, but it's uncovered deeper issues she's working through. She's making progress. The therapist thinks your participation in a session could help. You're under no obligation, but it might make a difference." "I understand," I replied, aware that it meant revisiting painful memories. "I'll consider it." They nodded and left, leaving me to reflect. Jim and Mary had made their share of mistakes, just as I had, but they were trying to repair the damage. Their sincerity struck a chord with me. "Let me know when and where," I said at last. "I'll try to be there." Relief washed over their faces. "Thank you, Samuel," Mary said. "We'll confirm with Dr. Faraday and let you know. Her next session is tomorrow, but Thursday at 4 p.m. might work." As it turned out, I was available. I arrived at the office a few minutes early and spotted Viviana sitting in the waiting area. She greeted me with a hesitant smile, her posture betraying a mix of confidence and vulnerability. "Hi, Samuel," she said warmly. "You look well." Her navy skirt and blazer, paired with a crisp white blouse, gave her a professional appearance, though her guarded demeanor revealed her uncertainty. "Viviana, you're looking better than you have in a while. Therapy seems to be helping." "Thank you, and thank you for coming today. It means a lot to me and my parents." "I want to be clear," she added. "This doesn't mean we'll reconcile. I can't go back to that life." "I understand," I replied, "and I've come to terms with that." "I assume you've heard about Brandon and me," she said tentatively. "Yes," I answered, and to be honest, I wasn't surprised. You've always had intense needs, and it was clear Brandon struggled to meet them. "You're right," she admitted. "Dr. Faraday helped me understand my actions with you and Brandon. He believes my pregnancy and miscarriage played a significant role in my behavior." "I'm not sure what I can do for you now," I said. "This feels like part of a healing process, acknowledging the past, making amends, and moving forward." "Yes," she said. "I've come to terms with my intimate addiction. After Brandon and I separated, I spiraled, going out every night, drinking heavily and sleeping with strangers. It was destructive. My parents intervened and I sought help. I've been celibate for over 3 months. The weight of her words lingered between us. Before I could respond, Dr. Faraday invited us into his office. The session was intense but cathartic. By the end, I felt a sense of release. As we left, Viviana turned to me. "Thank you again for coming," she said. "Would you like to grab coffee or a meal?" "Not today," I said. "I've had my fill of emotional turbulence. I'm sorry for how things ended between us and the pain it caused. Maybe someday we can be friends, but not yet." "I understand," she said, sadness evident in her voice. "I hope we can be friends in the future. You still mean a lot to me." As we walked to our cars, I gave her a brief kiss on the cheek. "Good luck with your recovery," I said. She watched as I walked away, a tear slipping down her face, and my silhouette disappeared into the distance, leaving behind the fragments of a life we once shared. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.